without the support of Kenton Community Foundation and Local Impact Alliance. It's really helped build bridges over the dozen years that we've been doing this. They're a great partner, help us organize all of this, and they find us great spaces like this that I think helps get the community into these spaces, and after you hear from some of our speakers, you'll want to come back later with family members and say, hey, I want to explore this a little bit more. Well, that does get us then to the Village Arts Factory and Wendy Harless, who's the Executive Director of Partnership for the Arts and Humanities, to talk about what's on the grounds and what are available. Wendy, all yours.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming today, and welcome to the Village Arts Factory. I am the Executive Director here at the Partnership for the Arts and Humanities, and we own and operate the Village Arts Factory. One thing I want to make sure everybody knows today is we are offering free art classes to all veterans. So if you would like to take a soap making class or a pottery class or a painting class, you can just call us up. Our number is 734-765-7061, and that will get you in touch right with me, and I will get you to the class that you, yes, go ahead. 734-765-7061. And please let all of your veteran friends and family know that, to get in touch with us if you would like to take a free pottery, painting, or soap making class. So I've been asked to tell everybody a little bit about the history here, and not very many people realize that this does have a connection to veterans, our Village Arts Factory. In 1943, Henry Ford came here to Canton and bought the property here, and it's about 14 acres that we have. So this building to the south was actually right here. And in true Henry Ford fashion, he moved the building and repurposed it because Henry had an appreciation for history and for historic preservation, and he always found a new purpose for buildings. So he moved the building that was a creamery to the south. He completely renovated it, and he built this factory here. And what he had in mind, this was really his passion project. And we've been told that he was here just about every day overseeing the operations. But what he did is he welcomed disabled veterans from World War II as they came home from service, gave them a place to live, right over there at the dormitory, gave them a place to work right here in the factory. So they made locks here, and the locks were shipped out to Willow Run, where they were installed in the Ford cars. And I know a lot of the history talks about that, like I said, he was here every day. He was working with people who were suffering from PTSD. At that time, they really didn't know that much about it. They didn't know what it was, but he, helped people to overcome many different obstacles, to have gainful employment, to have a purpose every day, a place to go, a community, really, for them to feel welcome, to feel comfortable, and to kind of get assimilated back into being here back stateside. So that's kind of our history of these two buildings, which are both on the National Register of Historic Places. But what we've got going on over here in our third building, we call that one a warehouse building, and the partnership bought this 14-acre parcel at auction in 2012, and the buildings were completely vacant, run down, derelict. A lot of people said they were eyesores, but the partnership had the vision for bringing these buildings back to life, to making them a useful place in Canton. And so this building over here, they have turned into art studio spaces. And we actually have 14 small business owners, artists, that call the warehouse home, And that's where we have our veterans classes going on. So we welcome you to come and take a look at our warehouse building. We have a gallery in there. Right now we've got the photography of Chad Schwarzenberger, who is an Emmy-winning photographer and videographer. And he also teaches classes in that building. But we've got our pottery studio, we've got Pilates, we have different creative movement with dance, we have jewelry making, cosmetic making, which is all hand done and all natural. We just have a lot of different things going on in there, and so we welcome you to come in and take a look at the space. And I think that's pretty much it for what we have going on today. But we welcome you and thank you so much for your service, and thank you for coming out today.
The partnership's a 501c3 philanthropic organization, so they're always looking for help with charitable donations. They have a number of events, weekend events here, where you can bring the family out to see what's going on. So watch them on Facebook or their website, and you'll find some interesting reasons to come back and see what's going on over in the warehouse. And you can see there's more work to be done as funds are raised for in this building as well. So we'd certainly have you think about that. Next, we want to talk about just what you see up over on the hill there. It's a cut short Veterans Memorial Garden that has been started, and we asked that Marion Rosa, the owner of MSA Delivery Service and a Partnership for the Arts board member and a longtime Canton supporter. I don't really remember how many years back we were on boards together. It's been a while. But I think this will be a great opportunity for you to talk a little bit, Miriam, about what's going on over my shoulder and what you've been so integrally involved with and your whole family. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and I just want one more time to thank you, men and women, for the service that you gave to our country. Without you, we all know our freedoms wouldn't be what they are today. So when you're forgetting how important you were, just remember there's a lot of us who feel you're really important. And because of that, I'm going to give you just a brief history of me. I grew up at Sergeant Romanowski Post out in Detroit. My father was a World War II veteran, and he brought his children up knowing how important patriotism is and how important the men and women who fought for our country are. So in light of that, I thought, I didn't serve in the service, obviously, but I'd like to do something to thank all of you who have. And in 2018, I met an artist, and her name was Pamela Alderman. And she came up with the design for our Veteran Memorial Garden. And the Veteran Memorial Garden is laid out like Arlington Cemetery or Holly, any of the national cemeteries, where the lines are just perfect. There's 21 posts up there. Some are 6 foot, some are 5 foot, and some are 4 foot. She decided to call the project Cut Short, which is really for the 4 foot posts, which have plaques on them for the service men and women who lost their lives for our freedom. And so what everybody, when they hear the word memorial, they think you have to be dead in order to get your name up there. And that's not a true thing. Any veteran can have a plaque up there. And my feeling about that is, you know what you did, but the kids today are not being taught what is really important. And so when they walk in the garden there and they see your face and they see your name and they see your comments, it kind of brings into them that these people did something good. And if we don't start putting this into our children's minds, we're just going downhill with everything that you people fought for. So what the Cut Short has are 3x5 plaques, and you can put your picture. Most of the guys put their initial picture when they went into the service. And then you can put a little bit about your history, which branch you served in, and then you can put a comment, on the plaque. looking from this view, it looks like there's no plaques because I originally had them all facing Ridge Road. There's about 100 plaques up there. And some of the quotes and some of the heartfelt things people have written on them is worth your time to walk up there and read what your brothers have put on there. We only have one female up there, so if you know any female veterans, tell them, you know, they need to come and get their name up there so we can be more represented. But there's flyers over there on the table with the coffee. And for $100, you can purchase a plaque, get your name engraved, get your picture engraved. If you don't want your picture up there, I can do your service, whether Navy or a Marine or Air Force or Army or Coast Guard, whatever you were in. And, you know, put your name out there so we can thank you when we go and we read the plaques. And just so that you know, the $100 for the plaque, about $75 of that goes back to the veterans. You know, it doesn't take me that much to make the plaque, but the rest of it goes back to the veterans. So, yeah, you can claim it as a donation if you choose. Thank you, and don't forget to pick up a flyer, and when you're done here, take a walk up there and read some of the plaques.
Thank you, Miriam. And again, this is one of these, you know, all over the country there are memorials to veterans, and they often get overlooked or people aren't aware of them, and I think this one needs some more publicity, so that to the extent you guys can talk about it, I think it's great. We're certainly going to drive a little traffic out of today's events from this, so a great opportunity to recognize not only your service, maybe it was your brother or your cousin or your best friend that you want to have recognized up there, so please keep that in mind. And then we're going to talk about, we're going to have somebody come up and talk about the Veterans Dorm and an organization that you may have heard about, Fallen and Wounded Soldiers Fund. They have taken on the task of helping utilize what is the Veterans Dorm. And I'd like Dr. Lynn Phillips, who's the Executive Director of the Fallen and Wounded Soldier Fund, to come up and tell you a little bit about that.
Well, for those of you not familiar with us, we've been around for 15 years, and we have essentially been the financial emergency room here in Michigan, primarily for Michigan's service-connected post-9/11 veterans. That's not the only group we assist, but it tends to be the bulk of who we help. So in focusing on the service-connected vets, we were helping them transition back into civilian life. We support them when they're not able to work because of the service-connected illness or disability. We can cover all kinds of living expenses, mortgage, rent, utilities, car payments, food, all the basic expenses we all have. As an all-volunteer organization, we have a 97% give rate, which we have maintained throughout the life of the organization. So in our effort to expand the scope of our services to veterans, we took a look at the fact that there are 3,800 homeless vets here in Michigan. So when we became aware of the opportunity offered by the partnership to take over use of the dorm, we jumped on that. We were thrilled to be able to have a facility that we could establish a transitional living center for homeless vets here in Michigan. We have 2 residing there now, each of whom has a completely unique set of circumstances and needs and disabilities. But we provide the support that they need. For example, we have VA staff come in to help them with claims, things like that. I'm there regularly to address, issues that go on. We've helped them get employment. We really have provided a stable living situation that helps them on their way towards self-sufficiency and independence. So I'm happy to answer questions that you may have about it. We can have between 6 and 8. I do have a house captain who would make number 9. He's there on site to kind of be my eyes and ears when I'm not there, and he oversees operations and keeps things running smoothly. COVID slowed us down a little bit, so I've had to kind of limit the numbers at this point to 3, so each of them has their own room where they can quarantine if necessary. Well, again, all their individual circumstances are different. I don't put a time limit. I look at it more in terms of meeting goals that they set when they come in. I sit down and take a look at what it is they need, to be able to move forward. So that's really what it's based on. Not usually. We get some referrals sometimes.
Any financial assistance from sailors and soldiers fund?
Well, he wanted to know if we get financial assistance from the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Fund. The organization does not directly, but we're able to make referrals to all the other state and county agencies here in Michigan to support our efforts. We do a lot of partnering with the trust fund. In fact, Michael can tell you something about that.
We all see it once or twice or see it frequently.
Can you speak up, sir?
I said we've all seen this. We see a veteran on the corner holding a sign saying, "I'm a veteran, please help." I'd stop and I would tell them to call. I'd given them numbers to call the VA to get assistance. Next week you see the guy at the same place. I've told him 2 or 3 times, and yet he's still seen there. So what would you do in that case? When the guys do not want to leave their corner.
Timing is everything in life. We sadly have to address that issue. There are homeless vets I know who are simply not ready to make use of the program that we're offering. They, for many different reasons, are just comfortable in a car with their dog. That's where they are. So we just continually make ourselves available and make folks aware of who we are and what we do. And eventually, most of them come around. Yes, sir.
Ask that question. I gotta tell you a story.
Yes.
Okay. I gotta tell you a story. A lot of times I've seen homeless too when I reside in Florida for the winter. And good for you. And we've seen this a lot of happening in Florida. They have a sign, they got a little bag and all this and that. But someone told me that there's a group that work together and they put all these collections together from the corners. And the person comes out and brings them a lunch and they all look like the homeless person poster, which they are. So getting back to my recommendation would be give the phone numbers of those just to make sure and let them make the call and therefore you'll feel better. I mean, everyone wants to help the homeless if it's justifiable. Yeah, that's what you want. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Lynn. Fallen Wounded Soldier Fund does a great job. Another 501c3 that we partner with, had the opportunity to sit on their board for a number of years. And as Lynn mentioned, 100% volunteer. The money's not going to administrative. Everything that comes in is really going back out to the veterans, so they do great work. Because of the road traffic, we are going to ask everybody to make sure they try to talk into a microphone so that others can hear, and they can hear on the internet who are watching as well. So if we slow you down a little bit on the questioning, it's because we're trying to make sure that everybody can hear. One other thing, and I don't have this, and maybe Michael Smith does, or Brigadier General Caroline Fausone has it. Canton, 2 years ago, I think it was Beth, when we were live, the VA Ann Arbor announced, they were being coy at the time, but ultimately announced that Canton was going to be the home of the next community-based outreach clinic, or CBOC. And as you know, if you've been watching the press, it's being built off Ford Road behind, I think that's a Walmart over there, right, Tom? And it's just about ready to open. I was hoping to be able to announce an open date, but I have not heard the open date. Have you, either of you? So it's supposed to be here this fall. That will make getting medical care in the community much easier for veterans. You won't have to go into the Ann Arbor or hospital. You'll be able to get community-based care right here on the border of Canton and Westland, where there's a sizable veterans population. So I know the VA is very excited about them. We've had them here at the summit before talking about it. We've seen the renderings. They've been through all their approvals at the township at this point, I believe. We've talked to them on Veterans Radio. So watch for that announcement. It's a big deal coming up for the local community, and I didn't want to skip over that. There are, and I know I'm going to get to the panelists. They're like, when are we doing questions? But there's always information to share with veterans. And Michael, I guess is there some breaking news that you feel we should pass along this morning?
Breaking news? No, not right now.
Okay. It'll come up in the questions and answers. Well, that gets us a chance to move then to our panelists. Let me start on my far left. We have a couple of disability attorneys. Their bios are in the program book you should all have. Deanne Bonner-Simpson with Legal Help for Veterans. Jennifer Marucci with Legal Help for Veterans. Michael Smith with Washtenaw County. He's the director of the Washtenaw County Department of Veterans Affairs. And Brigadier General Carol Ann Fausone, retired nurse and with a long-term veteran advocate. They have these two in particular have been on, I think, almost all of the panels for a long time, so they're kind of used to this process. And we'll kick off a few warm-up questions, and then we'll let you guys ask some questions. And as we do that, we'll ask that the microphone get moved around so that people can hear the question. My first warm-up question, and I guess this is for Mike or Carol Ann, because it all starts with this. I just mentioned the CBOC, but you have to be registered to get health care at the VA. How the heck do I register for health care at the VA?
Well, the application for VA healthcare is the VA Form 1010 EZ, and there's several ways you can do it. You can complete it with a County Department of Veterans Affairs, such as mine at Washtenaw County Department of Veterans Affairs if you live there, or with a Veteran Service Officer from the American Legion, the VFW, the Disabled American Veterans, the hospital down in Detroit, or you can actually go to the hospital in the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System in Ann Arbor and see the enrollment and eligibility section, and they will assist you in the completion of the VA Form 1010 EZ. So yes, in order to get health care at the VA medical centers or at any of their community-based outpatient clinics or CBOCs, or care in the community through the Office of Community Care, you have to be enrolled in the VA healthcare system.
So that just gets you enrolled for care. That doesn't mean you have the right to get care at VA. So General, you want to talk a little bit about the difference between enrolling and being eligible?
Well, that's always a tricky answer because a lot of the veterans will go in and the first question that sometimes is asked is, how much money do you make? And that should not be the first answer. Eligibility, it's real important to go through the process as Michael explained. And hopefully you get a card that you could just wave in front. And also, if you have a disability benefit, a disability rating, you could go to that VA medical center, whether it's in Ann Arbor or Detroit, and receive your service or what you are rated for. There are also different categories that you don't have to have a disability rating, but you served, let's say, in World War II or in Vietnam. You're Purple Heart, you're a POW. There are different categories that you might be eligible for. And so there are all of these different formulas. You need to sit down with someone like a VSO, a county counselor, or walk into the VA and ask to speak to somebody and they will help you to find out the eligibility.
So just as a follow-up, in terms of the difference between enrolling and eligibility, your eligibility for health care is going to be based on what General Fausone was referring to as your priority group. And there are 8 priority groups. The 8, they suspended enrollment in priority group 8. That was income-based. Priority group 7 is also income-based, but yet you agree to pay the co-payments for your health care. And then priority 6 through 1 is based on other eligibility status based like wartime service, priority group 6, whether you're receiving a VA pension, priority group 5, and then ratings are going to determine your eligibility for priority group 3, 2, and 1. So 3 is 0 to 10%, 2 is 20 to 40, and then priority group 1 is 50% service connected to 100%.
So 2 comments. One is, why did I ever think I could share a microphone with my wife? So I have to solve that problem by getting my own microphone. But you can see on registering and being entitled to health care, it can be a little complicated. I think that's what their main message is, and it's not the sort of thing that you can write down all 8 of these priority groups sitting here. But just know they're out there, and you shouldn't be deterred just because they say, oh, you made too much money. No. Still get in the system, because someday you may not make too much money. And you may qualify, so you already want to get in the system. And as your disability rating changes over time, you'll have a different set of that. So let me move to another question. I told you this wasn't going to work. So you all know those people are lawyers. You know about them. We don't have to talk about lawyers. She's a retired general, so you know why I have to have my own mic, because there's not a chance I'm going to be able to talk otherwise. So you know about general officers. So Michael, my next question really goes back to you. What is a county counselor? You are one. You've talked about one. They're available in most counties. Tell us a little bit about county counselors.
Well, the county departments of Veterans Affairs are in 78 of the 83 counties in Michigan right now. There are 5 counties that do not have either a full or part-time office at all. That's Aranac, Berry, Ionia, Ottawa, and Saginaw. What they have there are some arrangements where veteran service organizations come in and do something. Aranac has no arrangements for anything. But essentially, there are 3 laws that create county departments of Veterans Affairs. It goes all the way back to a state law in 1899, Public Act 214, that required counties to establish a Soldiers Relief Commission and a Soldiers Relief Fund to take care of veterans who are indigent, along with their survivors and their dependents, the parents of deceased veterans who are indigent, and of course they had to have wartime service and they had to be residents of the county. 12 years later, the state came to the counties and said, hey, you should reimburse families at least $300 for the burial expenses of the veterans and their survivors. And if they order a government marker from the VA and place it in a private cemetery, you should reimburse the families for that cost. Later, in 1953, we actually have the County Department of Veterans Affairs Act, Public Act 192, that gave counties a different structure for how they wanted to administer the Soldiers Relief Fund, but that it also gave them authority to expand their services to do just about everything that you could do as an advocate to take care of veterans, their survivors, and dependents. What we primarily do as accredited county veteran service officers, we are recognized through the VA's Office of General Counsel, through veteran service organizations, and we hold accreditation with them to be able to present, prepare, and prosecute claims on behalf of claimants before the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. We also do records retrievals, do all the archives, whether state or national. We do medals replacements. We work with survivors benefits, and we help with burial reimbursements, like I said, that we have through the county, as well as the federal government's burial reimbursements and their survivor benefits, such as dependency indemnity compensation or the survivor's pension, and then the burial allowances that come with that. We sit down with our veterans, we counsel them, we work with them face to face, we help them assemble all the evidence, the medical evidence necessary for disability compensation claims, which, by the way, is about 80 to 85% of the bulk of our work in a county department of Veterans Affairs. Now, some counties are not structured like other counties. In those 83 counties that have full or part-time offices, they should be providing the basic services that I just mentioned, but some counties are doing some other things differently.
because these were unfunded mandates to counties. It didn't come with state funding, and it does not come with federal dollars. More recently, yours truly kind of helped with this process. I worked with Representative Jason Wentworth back in 2018 to amend Public Act 192 of 1953 to establish what's called a County Veteran Service Fund grant, which has now, we're in the third fiscal year of that grant being available to counties. And what they get is $50,000 as a base grant from the state government. And then they get additional money based on a per capita amount, which is based on their veterans population. So that money, which has never existed before, is now available to counties, and they're doing a lot of different things beyond what I just said are the basic services. And they're doing it individually specific to their county and what they want to do with those state dollars.
So these men, women who are in these county councilor positions are really advocates for you. And the system can be pretty overwhelming, so it's always good to know that probably in your county there's somebody you can turn to and get some advice. And that also runs true. I heard a couple guys mention that they, went or elsewhere. There are similar organizations almost in every state. So these are, your benefits as a veteran aren't limited to Michigan. They're national benefits. They may vary state by state. But if you spend a lot of time out of state somewhere, you ought to be looking at and getting informed about what that state has available. So I saw a couple of hands. Why don't we do that? And I'll hold off on some of the more questions for the panel and see what you all got.
I live in Wayne County. Do we have to go to Wayne County to register, or can we go to Washington County?
So Wayne County Department of Veterans Affairs is downtown. They moved from where they were down on on Adams. They moved, and I'm not real certain about what their new location is. It's quite recent, but they do have some out county locations, such as in Westland at the Department of Health and Human Services building. There's a gentleman, Chris Brown, that comes out there from the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, and then some American Legion folks are downriver at the Downriver Community Center. And then there's another location in Hamtramck where American Legion service officers go as well. And then, of course, there's the hospital where you can also go to see a service officer that is associated with one of the veteran service organizations. Now, the county veteran service officers in Wayne County primarily focus on their state benefits, such as the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund, their Soldiers and Sailors Relief Fund, and their burial reimbursements. They really don't work with veterans with the claims process because they've traditionally not done that because of the other organizations in their backyard, as they say, that do that for them, such as the regional office of the VA, the service organizations, and some of the other organizations that provide those services.
Let me come to another question here, and again, I'll walk this around so you guys all do it.
I really remember in our folks that's on 100% disability, and he was just diagnosed with COPD. And I'm wondering if the VA would be able to support him with a portable oxygen tank, not tank, but portable oxygen.
Well, you just said the magic number at 100%. And when Jim asked us the question about eligibility and enrollment, it's real important to know what the different ratings afford you the benefit for. And that individual who just got 100%, he also is eligible now for the tax relief in his community. That's a tax abatement for his property. But getting back to your question, yes, at 100%, let me just back up 1 second. At 50% or greater, that individual, that veteran could receive all of his or her health care from the VA. And yes, he could go in to the VA, talk to his team, the team he belongs to at the VA, and they should be able to get him and apply for oxygen. Yes, and that should already be happening if he is 100% for COPD.
I've got one back here.
Form 1010EZ. Can we fill that out online, or do we have to PDF download it and mail it in?
Thank you so Thank you so much. Yes, that's one of the other ways you can do it. You can complete the form online and mail it to the Health Eligibility Center in Atlanta. You might be able to do it through e-benefits.
Yes, I believe you can.
You have to have an e-benefits account to do that. But if you just go online and fill out the PDF, there is no option to submit it electronically. You'd have to print it and then fax it or mail it. But yes, if you want to do it electronically, you'd have to do it through your e-benefits account.
I got a number of hands. I'll try to work my way through.
General Fausone kind of triggered a question. When you mentioned 100% disability and a full property tax credit for your local community. I know one of the struggles that some of the veterans that I've worked with is the year-over-year registration requirements with the VA in the tax assessor's office to qualify for that benefit. And I had heard that there was some movement at the state level to potentially make that a lifetime enrollment type of thing, where the veteran wouldn't be required year over year to produce a letter from the VA, re-qualify with the local tax assessor to get that benefit. So if anybody has any information on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, Dick, I will tell you that the letter is produced by the VA. There is some discussion, but as things change, it's always good to update the information. So that's one benefit with that tax abatement, that the spouse, if the spouse is living and if the veteran passes, that benefit passes on to the spouse. So it's another good way to keep it current as to what's happening. I have not heard that law has changed right now.
And I'd add to that, this is a state law where you have to do it every year. The VA gives you that letter anyway, updating you on what your disability status is. So you want to be in contact early with your city or township appraisers. Most of them know well about this. Those who don't have been educated. Legal Help for Veterans does have, Carolina wrote an ebook on a specific issue with some appraisers, so that was helpful. But again, if you're out of state, every state has a different law on this, and some states are much more generous than Michigan is. Florida is very generous, for example. So take this knowledge and kind of apply it elsewhere. If we're talking about state law things, realize that another state may have something similar and actually may have something better.
Exactly. I was going to piggyback, Jim, while you're walking to another question. Down in Florida, I was helping a veteran there with their disability, and go to find out at 30%, Florida kicks in and you get a rebate on your taxes. And in Arizona, it starts at 50%. But in Michigan, you have to be 100%. So what I encourage everybody to do, I encourage everybody, wherever your second place is or you're vacationing someplace else, the other thing is where you are vacationing, whether it's Florida, Arizona, or wherever, California, make sure you know in your area, if you do go to a VA medical center, know where in your area is your local VA, because you are eligible to walk in there and get care anywhere in the country. You carry those cards and you could walk in there and get service.
Hello. My husband's not with me today. He's the vet and he's working. I've got my son-in-law with me, but he has a lot of questions, but I'll just maybe do one or two at the top, if you don't mind. He wants to know, how do I start an initial VA disability claim?
Deanna, that was one of the planning questions for you, and I didn't have to plan it for you, so go ahead and take that.
Sure. For an initial disability claim, if you're referring to a service-connected disability, you want to file a 21526EZ. 21526EZ. And when you submit that, you want to fill that out thoroughly, explaining what specific disabilities you're requesting, And you want to support it with evidence of current diagnosis and evidence, medical or lay statements connecting your service to your currently diagnosed condition. You can, same as Mike already explained, you can do that online through eBenefits, or you can look the form up online, print it out, and fax or mail it.
Now you're talking about the 21/526 easy, even credit online.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Maybe I can talk to you later because I know other people have questions. I have quite a few.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Is there a limit on the property tax relief?
No. So Public Act 161 is the law that gives property tax exemptions to 100% permanently and totally disabled veterans. Went into effect in 2013, so it's not been into effect very long. And yes, you have to complete an annual affidavit to your assessor, and it's for your primary residence only. So you cannot exempt the property taxes for any property that abuts against it. So if you have other property that you may be using for agricultural purposes, or just another stand of woods or another property, that property cannot be exempted. It's only the primary residence.
One more question on the Agent Orange, like for future generations, for children and grandchildren, should they be tested or some kind of forms fill out for them?
So let's start with the question of, do I get a disability just because of Agent? I was exposed to Agent Orange. We hear this all the time. Dan, you want to take that one?
Sure. People do ask me that quite a bit. What about this Agent Orange disability benefit? There is no Agent Orange disability benefit. However, there are presumptions in the law. If you were in Vietnam, if you served in Vietnam or 12 nautical miles off of the shore of Vietnam, you are eligible for benefits without having to prove you were exposed to Agent Orange for certain disabilities. So there is a finite list of certain disabilities. Ones we see very commonly are diabetes, heart conditions, ischemic heart disease, and we've recently had 3 that were added. They are Parkinsonism. I have my note here because I wanted to be prepared for you guys on this one. And there are 2 others: Parkinsonism, hypothyroidism, easier for me to spell than say, and bladder cancer. So those are recently added, and if you served in Vietnam within 12 nautical miles of the shore of Vietnam, what this means is you don't have to prove you were exposed to Agent Orange. You have the diagnosis, you were there, it's service connected. But in terms of your question, sir, with respect to next generations, there are only specific conditions that are have to be the children of the veteran who served in Vietnam, who was presumed to be exposed to Agent Orange. For male veterans who served in Vietnam, the children who have spina bifida are eligible for service, for a benefit that comes through like service connection. And there are also some conditions of female veterans who served in Vietnam that are a different list. But grandchildren of Vietnam veterans are not eligible for any sort of a benefit for those disabilities. It's just the children, and it's a few specific conditions based on whether the parent is a man or a woman.
Thank you. My name is Anne Marie Graham-Hudick. I'm the Canton Township Supervisor, and I'd like to thank the Community Foundation for putting this on. I just want to let you know, my dad and my uncle, I've been able to register them for benefits online. Actually, online somewhat and more by the phone. There's an 800 number you can call, and then I was able to make an appointment. So that helped a lot during COVID. What we're having difficulty with is they want to set up their wills, and we're having difficulty finding out who they can work with legally to sit down face to face. They're both veterans, and they want to sit down with somebody, or can they do that on the phone, or where could they go for that?
Well, I guess I'll take that one a little bit. VA doesn't prepare wills for folks. any local attorney should be able to sit down and arrange an appointment to do that. We have people in our office who do that. But that's sort of just a general estate planning that you ought to be doing not only on your wills, but your power of attorneys, your medical power of attorneys. We have in the audience with us Dr. Mike Valletta, retired colonel, but also more importantly, Air Force colonel, and more importantly, heads up, I'm going to get the name wrong. Is it Hospice Michigan? Hospice of Michigan. Mike, do you want to comment about the importance of the proper documentations at the end? You didn't know I was going to call on for that. We didn't know you were going to ask this question.
Sure, thanks for the opportunity. So any licensed hospice provider, including our company, Hospice of Michigan and Harbor Hospice, have people who are trained to assist a veteran and their family with doing many of the basic tasks that we're hearing about. But I must tell you that whenever we see either a complex or difficult, or where there's a very short window of opportunity, so because we provide care at the end of life for seriously ill people, sometimes we don't have a lot of time to be applying and waiting and dealing with government agencies. And so we'll rely on legal help for veterans to help us break some of those logjams. But as a routine part of licensed provider end-of-life care hospice agencies, we do have people that are aware of these benefits and help you navigate some of the websites, particularly with funeral and burial arrangements, and making contact with some of the national and state cemeteries in the area for veteran burial benefits and all those kind of things. So when folks choose hospice care for their final months, they will receive benefit from it, but sometimes the real benefit is a referral directly to a firm that does this as their specialty.
And on the rules of things, again, I think any local state attorney should be able to help with that. We'll talk about aid and attendance later in a different question, and lawyers should not be bringing you in to do aid and attendance, which they can't charge for, and then roll into something else. But we'll get another question there. And we do have with us from Vermillion Funeral Homes, Jim, and also Chris Ford. So we can talk a little bit about burial benefits later from a funeral home director's viewpoint, as well as the general viewpoint. It's called on this a lot, so we'll get to that question momentarily. And we appreciate all the support we've always had from C&P Township, and we appreciate that. Let me find out. Okay, yeah.
I have been struggling trying to get clarification on the benefit of a service-connected disability. I was treated at the what was the Allen Park VA hospital that now is a flagpole and a monument. And the records, that my treatment records there were lost, apparently someplace in St. Louis, Missouri, in a fire or something. But that has forced me into an uphill battle to try and prove the treatment records for neuropathy and a couple of other conditions. And I'm getting help from legal help from veterans already. But it just seems like there should be a plethora of guys out there, men and women that were treated there and the records were lost. And the VA takes the position that I don't have my records, that they denied the benefit for it. I've got denial after denial. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, those of us who've been in this a long time keep hearing all kinds of those excuses that make it easy to move it off your desk, off the VA employee's desk to somebody else's. Deanne is a spouse of a 30-year Army, still active, so I don't want to call him that, but he's a military member. You want to relate a little bit to the frustration that spouses have with record keeping and lost records?
I wish my husband was here right now so that I could present this in his presence. But yeah, it's something that in terms of VA losing records or even the military losing records, it happens frequently. And so what I stress to people who are social security, and I tell my husband to express to everyone that reports to him, save your records. If you go to Citgo, get a copy and send them home and have them in a folder. So it is frustrating because over time that does tend to happen. With respect to your VA medical records in Allen Park, I know that we're working on your case and we're trying to find those records. But one thing that, Detroit VA is supposed to now be the record keeper for those records. So sometimes, I just go hunting and we ask Detroit, we ask everywhere where anybody has ever been treated. I found a veteran who moved to Florida, I found the Allen Park records. But in terms of, the frustration, we all, my husband himself has a service-connected disability. And, we had to harass people to get his records. So I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. It shouldn't make you feel any better that you're not the only one, but we do have backup systems in place to continue those requests, and they have to keep looking. The law says they have to keep looking until they determine that further efforts are futile. So that's a pretty high standard, so we like to put the heat on them a bit to keep them, put their feet to the fire to make sure that they keep looking, and we have our own little ways of checking.
Another one here.
I want to address the comment that you made about the wills. Go Google, because I found out there's a form for wills. It's a 6-digit number, which I don't remember, 10 something like that. But anyway, it's very tedious and detailed, but it is accessible. You can go online, find the form, and I viewed it. Very complicated, but it is something you might want to think about this. Answer your question regarding loss of records. I contacted Washington. There's a main number. You have to call them directly. And I was successful in 2 attempts where the people that I tried to help the veterans said that they could not find their records because it was in a fire. Now I got the details as far as the numbers of how many records were lost per branch, per service, but not with me. So my suggestion is to keep on trying, call that number, and you may have some luck because both the ones I found had luck.
Yeah, so let me ask Michael to comment on this because these are different issues. The records when they close down a facility like Allen Park, and they close VA facilities all the time, and the St. Louis fire are totally different issues. And the St. Louis fire issue gets overplayed all the time. So Michael, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so the fire in St. Louis was in July of 1973, and it only affected 2 branches of service, the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. So U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Navy, and U.S. Coast Guard records were never affected. So what the VA does, or what the archivists sometimes do, if they can't find your records, they say, hey, there was a fire. Your records may have been destroyed. And they're not even following the rules because some people that they're telling that to, their records weren't even there when the fire happened. So Army records for all those who served prior to 1959, all 80% of those records were destroyed by fire. The 20% that were recovered are fire damaged or water damaged. They are with the Records Reconstruction Branch, and they use those records to reconstruct the military histories of those who served prior to 1960, specifically all of our World War II and Korean veterans. That's a lot of folks. U.S. Army only. And there were organizational records or distribution copies of those military records for individuals that went to organizations. So there are organizational records that can be researched to find and reconstruct those veterans' military service. Air Force records were affected for those who served prior to 1964, and only certain parts of the alphabet, James Hubbard D through Z. So if your name ended in James or Hubbard, James D, through Z and you're in the Air Force 1964 or earlier, those records were destroyed. If your last name was A through Hubbard, James, E, or C, your records are still intact, US Air Force. So that is, you're talking about Allen Park records, but then talking about the St. Louis fire, that was only service treatment and service personnel records. It had no VA records involved. The VA's Records Management Center is also in St. Louis on a different street.
So this gets complicated, as you can see, and sometimes the excuse you get is just that it's just an excuse to get you off the phone and move on. It may not be the actual information. So that's why guys like your county counselors, Michael Smith, there are actually archivists of companies in St. Louis who you can hire who go in physically and thumb through it all, because the VA is a little lazy on that. So don't necessarily just give up because you were given an excuse. Let me ask a question and bring Jennifer in, because I think it may be of interest to this crowd, and that is, how does Social Security and VA benefits tie together? If I get one, do I automatically get the other? Do they offset each other? Jennifer Mariucci spent 10 years with the Social Security Administration here in Michigan and is deep and wide in that area. So I'll toss that question to her.
You get both benefits simultaneously. You have to apply both through the Social Security Administration and the VA to get each of those, but they're not mutually exclusive. VA benefits and Social Security benefits can be affected by workers' comp. There's an offset there, and I think that a lot of people have some confusion that transfers between the VA and Social Security benefits, and it doesn't. It's just if you're getting workers' compensation benefits or something different. But you can get those at the same time as long as you are eligible for both and have applied accurately. Just to piggyback on what we were saying before about the records, if you apply for anything with the VA or the Social Security, if you're going to do it via paper, make sure you make a copy of that. Keep everything, send everything, return receipt. Do not give the mailing system the benefit of the doubt. We've been talking about all of these lost records and lost mail. Just take the precaution. That's just something that anybody should do, especially for the lady in the back who was considering applying. Don't send that without return receipt. It's a good practice for everybody.
And while we're talking about paper records in the mail situation, I think 5 years from now we'll be talking about, well, I emailed it in, I used their server. How do I know? They say they never got it. So we're doing this last year has been a lot of upload for us and advocates all over the country. A new VA system. It seems to be working well. But it's, call me a cynic, but I'm a little concerned that at some point we're going to be told, oh yeah, that the Gremlins ate that email communication, and Michael's already got his hand on the microphone, so he must have a horror story he wants to tell. Michael, what's up?
Well, actually, I want to tell a great story. The VA and its partners, like County Departments of Veterans Affairs and our Veteran Service Organization partners, we have been actually electronically submitting claims for about 4 or 5 years now. We have the ability to either direct submit them through a software that we use called VetraSpec, meaning our work and all of the evidence cannot get lost. It electronically gets submitted to the VA, to their intake center, and then it's uploaded into the VVMS system electronically. Direct submit used to take about a week before you would see the documents in the Veterans Benefits Management System. I go in the next day, in 24 hours, I can see my documents in the Veterans Benefits Management System. I just did one the other day. The dependent was added. I just added a person's dependent that I thought was going to take 30 to 60 days. The award was already done when I go to check on it to see if it was in there. They had already did the award, added the dependent, paid the retroactive payment. Same with another veteran that I just did a claim for individual unemployability. They've already requested her exam. When I go in to check to see if my documents are there, the VA has already gotten it and already started the work. So the electronic submissions are working.
So a point of pride on that, VetraSpec was started by a company, actually a county counselor, here in Michigan. She and her sister started it's called something else before it was called Retrospect. And just recently sold big time to a big national company, a publicly exchanged company. So Michigan technology at work. So I'll give you that. We also use it. We were the client, or we were the attorneys for the owners of who started Retrospect and ultimately the sale this year. So we're real proud of that relationship. You mentioned C&P exam, and let me go to that question. Explain, Deanne, go ahead and take it. Explain what a C&P exam is, and then I'm going to come back and ask the general, who conducts the C&P exams?
So a C&P exam is a compensation examination that the VA orders as part of your disability claims process. You submit a claim and the VA sees, okay, we have evidence of a currently diagnosed condition, we have evidence of the veteran service, we have some medical evidence, but we don't have a definitive medical opinion saying that this disability is as likely as not caused by service. And that's the standard, as likely as not. Essentially, 50-50 chance that it's the service versus anything else. And if that's the case, then the benefit of the doubt goes to the veteran and the benefit should be granted. So it's a part of the claim development process. The VA orders it. You must attend. If you cannot, you must call. You must let them know that I won't be able to come. I need to reschedule. Otherwise, the VA will use that as a basis to deny your claim. So if you get that notice, you might get a FedEx packet, you might get a phone call. Some people are getting text messages. It's coming in the mail. It's coming at you in all different ways. But when you get it, check and make sure you can attend. If you cannot, you must tell them immediately to make sure that they don't mark you as a no-show. And so that's the general process of the C&P.
Carol, would you mind commenting on who does the C&P exam? Is it the VA doctor I normally see? Is it my private physician? Who does C&P exams?
Well, it's a combination of answers. It could be the VA physician, or depending on what you were going in for, as Deanne described, the disability. There could only be, in the case of PTSD and some of the diagnoses, there can only be certain physicians that examine you. But usually it is a VA physician. There are physicians in the C&P office. But with all the amounts of claims that are out there, what the VA has done is they contracted out to different companies around the country in different regions. You might hear LHI, you might hear VES, pardon me? QTC. Or QTC. In different areas, I even heard of a new one out west. But the VA is arranging for those appointments to be made. Now, if you're dealing with a VSO, a county counselor, or us, we want you to call us. If they have you going 3 or 4 hours, we're noticing this, down the road, let's say to Grand Rapids, to see an orthopedic physician for specific orthopedic issue, you need to call one of us. We've got great people right in our backyard. There's no reason for you to be traveling 3 and 4 hours to get an exam. So you really need to communicate with, your VSO, somebody that can help you. If you're a part of a team in the VA, you need to talk to somebody, because we are seeing some of those issues creep up more and more.
Just as a follow-up on communication, most of our clients who we represent assume when they get notice, we get notice. We do not get notice. They do not tell us if you have a C&P exam scheduled. So when you get that notice, pick up the phone or shoot an email and let us know right away, because we're gonna wanna get a copy of that report. It's very important that we have it so we can look at it and make sure that exam was done properly. But we won't know unless you tell us.
And I just want to highlight, if you get asked to go do an exam somewhere that doesn't make sense, you either aren't available, if you don't have enough notice, sometimes we hear notices of the exam the day before the exam. The guy goes, hey, I had something planned. I can't, drop what I was doing. All of that can be rescheduled. If the drive's too far, a lot of times we'll hear that, well, I can't drive. My wife's got to drive me and she doesn't like driving that far. Those things can be arranged. They're just, the computer's just kind of slotting you into a certain type of medical treatment provider at this consulting firm on a specific day and time, but that's not really controlling. The key is, they said, don't skip it. Don't not show up, because that'll be used against you. Yes, no.
Deanne, you used the critical word communication. We just handled this on Monday. One of our veterans called the wife called, and she was so upset. They got a package in the mail to go for an appointment they got it on Monday, that the veteran's appointment was Tuesday, and they had something else scheduled. With the mail irregularity and the letter sent, it was sent out 30 days before, but they got it one day. We hopped on the phone, we called over to the VA, and we got that taken care of. It got rescheduled for later this week, but that only happened because the family called us. So
I think Michael and I've
communication
had
is
this
important.
discussion many times about VA is really there to help you. They'll work all those problems out, but you have to approach those problems with a certain amount of calm approach on the phone with them and saying, hey, I have this problem. If you start out by yelling at them, Mike, how's that work?
Well, they're going to certainly still work with you. So when it comes to the contractors such as QTC, LHI, VES, or the VA's own C&P exam section, when they get the exam request from the Veterans Benefits Administration, they have 30 days. 30 days to contact the veteran, schedule the appointment, conduct the examination, transcribe the results, and get it back to the VA. So that's why it's very important that if you have to reschedule, they're only going to be able to reschedule you within that 30-day window that they have to conduct the exam, transcribe the exam results, and get it back to the VA. Now, we monitor that very, very, very closely because we know about this process. I watch and see, like I just said, I saw that the VA has already sent the exam request. I've already called my veteran to let her know, hey, you're going to get a letter in the mail, you're going to get a phone call or text for this exam. If you have to reschedule, but make sure that you do that and you let me know. Now, one of the reasons why I want to know is because when they upload that exam into the Veterans Benefits Management System, I will be able to see those exam results, and we will already begin the advocacy process if we see something wrong with that exam to make sure that we can mitigate a bad rating or start a strategy for an appellate process.
So one of the things that VA has, and silo is a bad word, but it helps describe it. So there's a healthcare silo. We kind of talked about how do you get into VA healthcare. There's a benefits silo, and we kind of talked about some of the, how do you start a benefit, disability benefit, and some things to look at. And in the next silo, if you will, is the burial benefits that are available to veterans. And we have some folks in the audience and our tables here today that talk a little bit about this. It's an important, dignified benefit. And out of those three silos, my personal opinion is the burial benefit silo works extremely well from beginning to end of the process. Now, they have a decent job, I suppose, the healthcare folks, disability benefit folks in some regards. But Carol Ann, do you want to start a little bit about talking about that? And we're going to, I'll run the microphone over to Jim and Chris and see if they want to add some things. And if Dr. Paletta wants to jump in, he's more than welcome to as well.
Well, the one thing I want to tell you in the audience is, and I think we've talked about it before, and between Jennifer and Deanne and Michael. If you've got your DD 214 and those critical pieces of paper, the best thing you could do for your family is put them in a special spot that your daughter, your wife, your children are going to know where they are, because that DD 214 is your passport from beginning to the end. That will help you get buried in a national cemetery. It will help you work with a certified funeral department, agency, funeral home. It will help everything at this difficult end period of life go a lot smoother. When I was at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I would get calls in the middle of the night from family members who were distraught that their loved one died and they couldn't find the DD 214 and they wanted to be buried in the National Cemetery and they did not know where to go. And so at the time, and many years ago, and I worked with Michael a long time, they had the funeral home training service, and I know these guys are awesome to help a family work through, to get all the benefits and to help them out. But you could do yourself a big favor by having that paperwork very readily protected in a safe box that you could pull it out. That's what I would recommend.
Let's get a really unique opportunity to have somebody who has to actually deal with this on a regular basis. Let's get your input.
Yeah, we would endorse that exactly. Make sure you know where your DD 214 is, keep it safe. And if you want to, if you got an extra 10 minutes, stop by your funeral home, ask them to make a little file for you, and put your name, phone number, address, and your DD 214 with the funeral home. Then, because when somebody dies, people are all upset and they can't even remember what their name is, let alone where the papers are. Now, if you're nice and organized, you got one strong box and everything's there, great. But your kids know it. But if nothing else, stop by us or whatever funeral home you deal with, have them make a little file, and then ask whatever other questions you might have about your funeral, and that you can get stuff written down. Or you can take a further step to actually plan. To pick everything out, decide what church, decide you can pick caskets out, you can pick all those details. But if you're only going to do one thing, it's get that DD 214 in a safe place.
So with an accredited funeral home, you would know that if I came to you and announced that my father was a veteran and here's all of the information, and I would like him or her buried in a national cemetery, you would take care of notifying and doing that process. Please share that with the audience.
We would talk about and decide what national cemetery. The closest here is Great Lakes National Cemetery, open 20 years maybe.
2007.
Oh, not quite, but whatever that is, 14 years. Previous to that, we had to go to Fort Custer near Battle Creek, actually, in a little city called Augusta. And when I started working with my dad, I remember taking a lot of trips down to Dayton. And before that, my dad talked about having to go to Nancy, Kentucky. So way back in the day, you did get to get very, very close to home. But now with the number of vets dying and the number living in Southeast Michigan, they opened the one in Great Lakes. It is a beautiful place. Sometimes our government does a great job with things and sometimes not such a great job. Well, that cemetery started out not so great. The contractor they hired didn't do a great job, but they brought somebody new in, and it is a beautiful place. You're up ever near Holly, punch in Great Lakes National Cemetery to your phone, if you have a smart one, and swing by there and see it. It's really pretty. It's outdoors, a lot of sandhill cranes, it's surrounding a lake, and you can get buried in the ground for a veteran and their spouse. So they provide the grave, they provide the digging of the grave, they provide the minimum cement or container, they provide the headstone for the veteran and their spouse, and or minor dependent children, or you can, caskets can be buried, urns can get buried, or urns can get placed into a niche in the wall. Again, for the veteran, their spouse, and occasionally I have people say, what's the cost?
No, it's like going to VA hospital. I don't think you can pay anything in a hospital. You can't pay anything at the cemetery. Now, you have to pay at the funeral home. You'll have to pay for death certificates and flowers and that kind of thing. But the grave, the digging, the vault, the marker, or the niche is all provided for charge, and they do a really nice job. I didn't even know about this.
At the lake at Great Lakes, they'll also do scattering of cremains in the lake, and if you are scattered, they'll put up a marker next to the lake, a memorial marker indicating that you've been scattered there as well.
So they'll be around. You can ask some more questions. But one of the things that when we buried my dad out there, and my mom out there, my dad was in the Navy in World War II. One of the things I didn't know is it has to get scheduled, right? It's like all things in the military, you got to line up. So these guys, the funeral home takes care of scheduling that with St. Louis. I believe it's in St. Louis who does this. And they get you a specific time for the burial, and maybe weeks later or maybe days later, depending on what's going on. And it's really well done and well organized, as you would expect from this particular silo. The funeral home will bring out the casket, and you can they will actually put on markers on the hearse, the Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever you want to get communicated, as I could describe a terribly dignified process. So, and again, this isn't just a Michigan benefit. There are national cemeteries in every state all over the country. So if you end up being a resident somebody else, or brother is, or what have you, it's available to you. So like most things in life, a little planning ahead makes sense. And I think that's what they're trying to communicate, is this is certainly a time to plan ahead, because when the event occurs, you're thinking about a lot of other stuff. Let me ask Dr. Paletta for some observations from his professional life.
Well, I wanted to actually ask, was probably a planted question, mostly to get an answer from the panel, but it's a situation that we face a lot. You know, again, we take care of vets and their families who are facing a serious illness, and probably at the end of life. And the question they ask us is, you know, a lot of the discussion that we've had here is centered around disability. But there are a lot of veterans out there who say, all right, well, I served in Germany for several years in the 60s, and I was in the Guard for a number of years after that. I didn't go to Vietnam. I didn't serve in combat. I don't have a disability. I don't have a service-connected illness. Yet, I honorably served, and now, you know, for my family and for myself, what's an easy way that I can find out what I may be eligible for in terms of benefits? I don't want to pay a lawyer to have to, you know, go through a laborious search. Are there easy ways that, as an honorably discharged veteran, not disabled, not combat injured, find out what I and my family need?
That's why the state and feds send money down to our county veteran officers and some of our national organizations like PVA or American Legion. Those sort of folks can also provide information. But and in today's environment, because everything's on the web somewhere, easy may be the problem. There's so many opportunities to gather information. Some of that information is maybe more complex than you want to know, but there are burial benefits for folks who aren't, you know, you can get a grave marker, a private cemetery, those sorts of things. You can get, Michael mentioned earlier, in Michigan, you can get a certain amount of compensation. Every veteran has who's honorably discharged. Michael or Caroline, you want to add to that response at all?
So yes, probably one of the best places to start is with the County Department of Veterans Affairs, because we do both county burial reimbursements based on that state law, Public Act 235 of 1911, the funeral expenses of veterans. Again, that comes with certain reimbursements. There are eligibility criteria for that. You have to be a resident of the county, it has to be within 2 years of the veteran's passing, and the veteran have to have served on active duty during a recognized period of warfare at least 90 days. So there are those things that we'll interpret for the family to determine that. With the federal government, there are certain burial allowances as well. But again, as you had alluded, They are for those who are service connected at any rate, regardless of combat status or anything. And that then translates into either a service-connected burial allowance, which is $2,000, meaning if you died as a result of your service-related disability, regardless of the rating, and again, regardless of your status, combat or non-combat, then their eligible dependents are in position to receive survivor benefits such as dependency indemnity compensation and the $2,000, and the non-service connected burial allowance. So, and that's a little bit lesser. But we can certainly sit down and look at the benefits that are available, because they do come in those two different categories, either monetary or symbolic. So the symbolic benefits are the ones that we would want to focus on for those who are not going to get anything that's monetary, such as the flag, burial in a national cemetery, the Presidential Memorial Certificate, which comes from the White House Office of Memorial Affairs. It's a nicely done certificate. It's on cardstock. It's got a gold flake embossed presidential seal. It basically comes from the president that says, "Thank you to the family for the veteran service." So we would focus on those and then of course a government marker or a headstone or marker that can be placed in a private cemetery, as well as a medallion that can be placed on a privately purchased headstone.
I think just to piggyback, when Jim alluded to Mom and Dad Fausone buried, this is another benefit that the spouse is eligible for, to be buried at the National Cemetery. Whoever goes first, if the spouse goes first and you have your DD 214 and you are recognized, you will be buried first or put in the columbarium, and then when the veteran goes. So that's in planning, that's obviously very important to know if you are eligible for this benefit. The reason I think planning is real important, one of the hardest things, and I think Michael will agree with this, when you have to tell a veteran and their family that you're not eligible for any benefits, including burial, because you were a peacetime veteran. We do have to tell those during the periods, we talk about World War I, World War II, Korean War, thank you. It's great to have a Korean veteran here, along with a couple World War II. But when that happens, I mean, it hits my heart, and I know Congress has tried to look at that and approve that. They can't be buried in a national cemetery. And, there's not even, the words can't express that. They said, well, I was in the National Guard, or I was in the reserves, I was ready to go. I gave, X number of years of my life away from my family. You mean I get nothing? And so that's really hard too. And I think preparing is real important to know what you're eligible for.
Yeah, and everybody might think you were honorably discharged, and it turns out you weren't. So let me pass it over. Jim, you had a comment.
Just wanted to make sure the cash benefits, as far as helping to pay toward funeral home expenses, are usually you have to serve during wartime for the county benefit, or die in a VA hospital, or have a VA disability for the benefits from the national VA. The burial benefit, as far as the grave and the digging, getting buried in a national cemetery, if you're in active duty, can be wartime or peacetime. If you're National Guard, you have to have been called up to serve active duty as part of National Guard. So as long as you're active duty in the military, wartime, peacetime, the grave for you, your spouse, or niches, or scattered in the lake is you are eligible for that. And everybody, national cemetery or private cemetery, as long as you're honorably discharged veteran, you'll get the headstone. You have grave in Knollwood, Riverside, wherever, you can get the headstone. So the active, I'm sorry, the headstone is provided for any honorably discharged veteran, regardless whether you're in a national cemetery or in a private cemetery.
So I want to I'll take this question, then I want to come back and ask a question to Deanne about, hey, what benefits does the spouse get when the veteran dies? We're talking about burial, but maybe in a broader context, she'll be able to answer that as well. But let's take this question.
I just saw, now this come up years ago, I went to a DFW conference, some sort of training session, and the guy from, I think it was Great Lakes, the manager there, he talked about multiple spouses in the grave, and the discussion came up, and of course they come up afterwards in the lounge because not everybody goes to those conferences. And I told him, I heard it was a Vietnam policy, you can have 5 wives in one grave. And I guess it doesn't apply to me, but I know a couple of guys that, they're in that situation. And I said, well, here, I think it's 5, but what's the policy?
One's too many.
It is 5. And actually, he was at our conference and he shared that in one veteran's grave site, there are 5 there. And one of the spouses buried there, he divorced. No, people don't know that, but because it was his preference and her preference to be
buried there, her other husband allowed her to be buried there with him.
That's what you under these things. Nobody would believe that. I didn't know what you were talking. So I have an online question I want to pose from Gail. It's a Social Security question. So the question online is, initially, if you don't sign up for Schedule B benefits, what is the penalty you would have to pay to sign up now? Do they penalize you for each month? And I don't know that. That's deeper than I know, so I'm hoping Jennifer has some experience with it.
Well, that's the Schedule B benefits are talking about your Medicare benefits, and usually you're required to take those just because the insurance carriers want to write off. So I don't know offhand the penalty, but I would definitely advise that this person sign up and look into that because the insurance companies definitely are galvanized to get the person off of their books. And it can be very expensive, but offhand I just don't know the specifics.
We have seen that in the context of veterans who get their health care at VA and say, well, I don't need Schedule B. And actually our advice always is they should have them both because again, you never know when you're going to drop out of one system and go into the other system or vice versa. So while you think you may be saving something in the short term by avoiding it, you're probably not in the long term. So that may be where that question arises out of. Any other question from the audience that I haven't reached to? So this is there's another complicated question, but I want to at least bring it up. You may not be able to answer it entirely. Michael and Caroline have talked about adaptive grants on Veterans Radio and with their various clients. So VA offers a number of different grants. Some of them are state, some of them are federal, for adaptive housing, adaptive cars, different adaptive housing grants. And again, this is a fairly complex area to understand. Either of you want to take a whack at explaining what's out there?
So there are housing adaptation grants, or what's called specially adapted housing and special housing adaptations. Those used to be more prevalent in the past, but about 5 years ago, the VA restricted the amount of money that they would spend each year doing those types of projects. The other type of housing adaptations that you can get is through the hospitals. It's called a HISA grant, Housing Improvement Structural Alterations. So that HISA grant is about $4,500, but then it can be extended up, I believe, to about $6,000, depending on what the veteran needs modified in his or her home. So those are the 3 different types of housing adaptations that are available through the VA.
The special adaptive housing and the special housing are federal grants. The HRSA is a state grant. Yeah. Okay, through the VA hospital. But when I said state, it's because I would send you to the VA in Ann Arbor or, Detroit. I focus it in that way. And I know the organization that I would always send people to is the Paralyzed Veterans. I mean, Mike Harris there would help people with ramps and redoing kitchens and bathrooms, but you need to apply first. You don't go and do all of the remodeling and all the work first and then say VA paid for it. You have to Mother May I first, come in, a lot of paperwork. And as Michael said, a few years ago, they ramped up and said, this sounds like a lot of money, but when you've got 120, 150 grants coming in nationwide, the VA said nationally, we're going to set aside $1 million. And when that money is gone, it's gone. You could reapply for the next year. So you're sort of starting all over again. But it has to be approved for these adaptive housing grants.
So I got myself sidetracked, which is easy to do. When I was asking a question back there, I got thrown off by the 5 burial things. I'm still thinking about that. I got 4 more wives to go. Or she has 4 more husbands to go. Let's put it that way. Yeah, because I wanted to talk about what's available for the spouses. That we've been talking about what's available for the veterans. And we have a couple of spouses in the room, but that's who we often get the calls from, is the wife primarily. Dan, do you want to take that and talk a little bit about how this, particularly on the disability side, what happens with the spouse when the veterans die? And I'll come back to Michael or Carolyn to kind of talk about, well, does the spouse get any health care once the veteran dies? And so that's a different issue.
Sure. So we do get a lot of questions, and a lot of times veterans will ask us if they're very ill, they want to make sure that their spouse knows how to proceed. So it's important to understand that if a veteran has a pending claim when they pass away, there is no such thing as the spouse taking it. Now I have this 100% service connected forever or what have you. But if there's a pending claim, they can step into the shoes of the veteran, so to speak, until a decision is made, a final decision. So the spouse can substitute in. You have to do this within a year of the veteran's passing. And then the VA will continue adjudicating that claim until it's finally adjudicated, including appeals. So if it's still not done properly, the spouse can continue the appeals process until they're satisfied that it's correct. At that point, when it's granted, the spouse will receive a lump sum of back benefits, which would be from the date of claim that the veteran filed it until the date of the veteran's death. So that is called accrued benefits. And that essentially it's a common benefit, but people need to be aware because it's only 1 year after the veteran's death, and you have to tell the VA, I'm stepping into their shoes now, you need to substitute me. It's on a form that you file that also has the other 2 benefits that are for surviving spouses. One is called Dependent Indemnity Compensation. We normally call it DIC. And that benefit is for spouses whose veteran passed away as a result of a service-connected disability. You do not have to be service-connected when the veteran passes away. If they're not service-connected, this doesn't mean that you're not eligible. If you have medical evidence showing that the cause of death was as a result of service, then you are eligible for DIC. That is a separate benefit for the dependent surviving spouse, and that is a set amount. It varies from year to year, but I think it's around $1,500 right now, and that's a monthly benefit for the spouse, completely separate from any service-connected benefit that the veteran might have pending. The last one is the pension. The pension is a survivor's pension, and it is an income-dependent benefit. So it's something that you would have to apply for. There's an upper threshold. I think Michael could correct me if I'm wrong, but it's around $30,000. So one thing about that, though, you can offset that with medical expenses. So if you, and the funeral expenses of the veteran who passed away, but you have to provide that financial information. The VA will determine whether you're financially eligible for the pension.
Plus I died, does my spouse get any VA healthcare? Question. The answer is unfortunately simple. Go ahead, Michael.
It depends. So as Deanne just alluded, if they are granted dependency indemnity compensation, they will also be granted what's called CHAMP VA, which is a healthcare insurance, not a health care. Now, if certain VA hospitals are participators with CHAMP VA, those spouses can get their health care at a VA medical center. But typically they get it out on the economy and they use it to supplement any other insurances because CHAMP VA will act as a secondary provider, or they can act as a primary provider if you don't have any other insurance.
We're back to that Medicare issue, right? Why I want that insurance, because then my other available insurances may be secondary, even tertiary to that, to make sure I don't have more out of pocket.
I'm glad you mentioned that. To be CHAMP VA eligible, you have to be Medicare eligible for A and B.
Just as a quick note, since we're talking about spousal benefits, you can hear it.
The motorcycle's a little overwhelming. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that for spousal benefits, there's a Social Security spousal benefit, you know, in the same way that there's for veterans benefits. Are we good? And it's a little bit easier that you don't have to go through the entire process that Deanne was talking about for Social Security. You have to apply, but and generally it's the wife, the lower income. She can take over the husband's Social Security benefits. I mean, I think most people know that, but it's I just wanted to point out that it's a little easier than the VA.
And speaking of just to piggyback on Jen, there is a benefit called aid in attendance, and it is for the veteran and or the spouse or the widow, but this is an income based now. So if the income is less than 127,000, that includes all the assets. The spouse or the widow at this time, we're talking if the veteran dies, could apply to go through that process to take care of health care needs. Let's say if you're in an extended care, a long-term care facility. I did a presentation yesterday, and the number one answer is always, I want to put my mom and dad in there. They're doing really well, but man, that rent is $2,500. Could I apply for aid and attendance? The answer is no. If you don't have, I love the gentleman in back with the red sweatshirt on. He's answering my questions. It's great. You've got 100%. It's absolutely not. Aid and attendance is not for rent. It's for to help you with, you know, feeding and eating, the activities of daily living. And I know that's hard to swallow, because on top of the rent, you're paying for this another amount, usually somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000. But that's another benefit that the widow is eligible for.
I want to make it real clear that aid and attendance is actually the survivor's pension. There are 3 different categories under which the VA pays it. There's a surviving spouse or a veteran who needs the pension just because of a lack of income or disabilities that prevent them from working. Then there's a veteran or a surviving spouse that's housebound. Now the VA's maximum annual pension rate is higher under that category, means they allow for a little bit more income. But it's the category of aid and attendance, a veteran or a surviving spouse that's in need of aid and attendance, where we're successful, because that's where we can use those medical expenses, those recurring unreimbursed medical expenses, to reduce countable income below the maximum annual pension rate. If we get it to 0, then the VA pays the full pension rate, annual pension rate. They won't pay any higher. If we can't get the income to 0, the VA minuses the residual income from the maximum annual pension rate, and whatever that number is that person's pension that the VA pays on a monthly basis. So those medical expenses in the category of aid attendance helps us secure that benefit, that survivor's pension or that non-service connected disability pension for the veteran.
We're coming to the end of our time, and I want to give people a chance to talk to the panelists sort of one-on-one afterwards. Everybody will sit around a chair, and I'd also encourage you to walk up and look at the Cut Short Memorial, or walk into the Arts Factory and see what's being done over there. It's really pretty incredible. I don't know that the Vets dorm is open for peering, because I think there's people living in there. So you won't be able to do that, but if you walk up to the porch, you'll get a sense of it. It's what Henry Ford was trying to do. So we want to leave a little time for that. But I do have a final question from the audience if somebody came over and asked me to ask the panel, and then I'll still take one or two more if you wave your hand real hard. So the question that I was asked from the audience a moment ago was, hey, I've asked my doctor, my private doctor, to fill out a form to help me get my VA disability, but man, that form is really long, and there's really nothing in it from him. How do you got any suggestions how I get my private doctor to help me out a little bit? So Deanne, you've dealt with that problem. I'm sure Michael, you have too. If either one of you want to give a short answer to help them out as we come to the end of the time.
Sure. If your doctor's willing to fill out the disability benefits questionnaire, that would be ideal, but we understand it is time consuming and not part of what they would normally do. But what you can do is ask them to write you a letter explaining how they treat you, how they know you, that they're familiar with your military service, and that it's their medical opinion that based on the thing that happened in service, it is as likely as not the cause of your illness or injury. That's
would you repeat the magic language?
As likely as not. And then I also tell them in parentheses, put 50-50 percentage chance, or 50-50 that it is. So it's easy for the VA to understand that the doctor's not speculating, that they're saying specifically it's as likely as not. And one thing that is helpful to doctors is if they understand it's not a court of law, we're not holding you to, a legal standard in a civil litigation case. It's simply you saying, I'm familiar with this person, I understand their medical condition, I understand their service, and it's my medical opinion that this illness or injury is as likely as not caused by the veteran service.
The DBQ, which is the long form you gave to the doctor, and he said, I'm not filling that out. Mike, you want to talk about sort of what you do to get around that hesitancy by the doctors?
To be honest with you, that form was one of the greatest things that the VA created. It was intended to replace the compensation and pension exam until the VA's own doctors refused to complete them. Civilian doctors loved them because we were always asking for the letters, and they would always say, hey, is there a form I can fill out? So the DBQs became very, very popular with civilian doctors. VA doctors would not fill them out, to the point where the VA hospitals created DBQ clinics so that doctors who don't treat you fill out a form that your treating physician refused to fill out. It got to be such a debacle that the VA removed DBQs for being used by private physicians until they were sued, and we just won the lawsuit, and they had to restore civilian DBQs as recently as about 4 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. So they just became available for us again. So I would just encourage your doctor that everything that the VA needs to assess your disability is on that form. And if he or she would complete it, it would just be the best thing that they could do for you.
Sounds like a box of donuts to the doctor's office might be in order.
Exactly.
To help get that over the edge. That always worked, didn't it, Mike? So we brought in something to eat. Jimmy John's now, okay. A much more helpful choice. So we're at the end of the time. As I say, I want to leave a little time for everybody. Is there any final questions we have? There always is, so that's why I leave a little space for that too.
This goes back to the National Cemetery in Holly. This is my wife's question. I brought her up there to take a look at it. And she said, this is beautiful. And she wanted to know if she could get a site where we could overlook the lake.
The
So
answer
then-
is no.
Well, if you're scattered. Yeah, you could get scattered. Tell her she could be scattered. You're going into this.
If you're scattered
It-
or
it-
in say Arlington, they have specific gardens or areas. If you were a certain notable veteran, then you could go there. But otherwise, the next plot that's open, that's where you're going.
The nurses have a spot. The nurses have a spot at Arlington, so that's what she's referring to. But otherwise, it's just sequential. St. Louis gives you a time slot, and you're the next one up. That's how that works. So again, we really appreciate everybody coming out today. The weather held. This worked out great, Beth. We want to thank our friends at the Partnership for the Arts. When you'll be around to answer any questions you may have. Lynn, thanks for all you're doing with Fallen and Wounded Soldiers Fund and the Veterans Dorm. If you have questions, you certainly ask her about that. I believe Miriam's stepped out, but if you had questions on the Cut Short Memorial, there's materials over there. Under big concrete rocks, because the wind picked up, we have a variety of books and pamphlets. Feel free to pick those. And folks will be around. We thank Jim for you guys coming out to answer some questions, and I know you'll be available to answer any questions folks might have here today. 12 years of doing this is, I don't think we ever thought it would last that long, or we'd still be doing it, and that we'd be traveling from place to place, but this is certainly one of the prettiest places we've done it. And with any luck and a little bit of support from our sponsors like they do every year, which we really appreciate our sponsors, maybe we'll do this again next year and have Lucky 13 and continue with great weather. I want to thank the panelists. It takes time out of all of their days to answer some questions they know I'm going to throw at them, and some I don't. And I'm just still shocked that we knew the answer to the 5 whys. Still amazed. That's going to be a whole new storyline. But thanks everybody for coming, and more importantly, thank you for your service to the country.